Okay, we're now on the VP forum site, and I'm actually going to show you where you actually download these Backglasses that I use for my pinball machines. Okay, now when you go to the VP forum site, okay, you go to vpforums.org. There's going to be things that says front end media and backglass. When you click on front end media and backglass, there's going to be a section here for DB2S animated backglasses. Now on my pinball cabinets, I'm currently using DB2S animated backglasses because I've been really happy with the performance of those. Okay. Now when you type in the letter, you're going to actually have a bunch of backglasses that are going to come up, as you can see here. Now, the one I'm going to be showing you today, I have two I'm going to be showing you. I'm going to be showing the Indiana Jones first, the authentic version of that, and the fantasy backlash version of that first. This is actually where you would go to download these. When you look under Indiana Jones, you're going to see a thing that could say Indiana Jones animated backglass. Now, what's going to happen is when you check these backglasses, okay, when you click on a backglass and you look at the description under the backglass, what it's going to do is it's actually going to tell you a little bit about the backglasses. It'll give you a description. Now, as soon as it comes up here, I'll get a chance to show you here exactly what it does. Okay, now what you're going to notice on this one here is you're going to see that this particular animated backglass is for 2-screen sets with high resolution images. Okay, now that is an animated backglass. Okay, now if you want to get a fantasy version of this, what you're going to do is when you go back to this, you're going to notice there's a thing called, there's another file. A lot of times you'll have an authentic one here. Sometimes you'll actually have two backglasses. You'll have a regular backglass and then you'll have a fantasy. Now this is a fantasy version. It's under Indiana Jones and Pinball Adventure, but this is a fantasy version. Okay. Now, and the same thing when you go to this, when you go to the description, it's going to tell you in the description whether or not it has fantasy mode or not. That's one of the things to keep in mind. Not all the backglasses in Visual Pinball have fantasy mode. Some do and some do not. Now this one, for example, says, if you Indiana Jones Pinball Adventure, authentic and fantasy versions. This is the one I'm actually going to be showing you on my pinball cabinet that I'm using right now. It has an authentic and a fantasy version. Okay, so just keep in mind when you're downloading these backglasses, these animated backglasses, not all of them have authentic and fantasy. You have to actually read the description under the backglass to determine if it actually has that, and it'll tell you in the description underneath. Okay, now let me go ahead and show you what Indiana Jones looks like. First, I'm going to log this out. Now, the first one I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you the Indiana Jones with the authentic backglass first, and then you'll get a pretty good idea of the difference between the two. Okay, I'm going to bring up Indiana Jones, the Pinball Adventure. Okay, now here we have Indiana Jones coming up. Now, let me move the camera up just a little bit so I can show you the top of this so you get an idea of the difference here between the two. Okay, now this is what's called authentic. You're going to notice on top here that all the lights and things are standard. If you were to play this like at the Pinball Hall of Fame, this is exactly what the backglass would look like. Very similar to this here. It might have some lights down here, but basically when you're playing a pinball machine like at the Las Vegas Pinball Hall of Fame, I have videos on my channel, by the way, to actually show you what the Las Vegas Pinball Hall of Fame looks like in Las Vegas. It's a pretty amazing place. This is basically what the backglass would look like if you were playing the real pinball machine. Just basically, it has a backlight behind it, and you notice that the letters and things are basically one color. Now, if I start a game, you're going to notice that this doesn't really do anything special here, because this is how the original pinball machine was. Notice there's nothing changing here. It's all basically standard lighting on the top and bottom. Now, the thing to keep in mind is this is known as a dual backglass. The way you find that out is when you're in Visual Pinball, when you're actually playing on Visual Pinball, if you click on the right mouse button, it's going to bring up a mode. You're going to notice on here it says B2S Backglass Service. There's an authentic mode, which is what we're in now, but you're also going to notice there's also a fantasy mode that's underneath. Now, when I put it in fantasy, you're going to see the difference between the two, okay? Now remember, This is the authentic mode. Notice not a whole lot of nothing's changing here. It's pretty much standard lighting all the way through. Now in animated backlights, what they do is they actually add lights and things to the top of this to make it do different things. You know, like the letters and things might flash. You may have additional lights in here, like LEDs, or you can have lightning bolts, various things in here, whatever the person designing the Backglass programmed into it. Okay? So let me go ahead and show you what the fantasy Backglass looks like. Okay, we're going to load the fantasy Backglass into the same setting. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and bring this up again. Okay, when you go between fantasy and authentic Backglasses, usually you have to reload the table. So that's what I'm going to do here for it. I'm going to go ahead and reload the table. Now what you're going to notice now is when this table comes up now, you're going to notice the difference between the authentic version you just saw and the fantasy version. Okay, now you're getting a chance to see. Now you're getting a chance to see the fantasy version. Now, if you remember in the one I just showed you, it didn't have all these lights. Notice how these lights and everything are strobing. Well, that's the fantasy version. They've also added additional lights and things on here as well. This is known as a fantasy version. This is one of the reasons why visual pinball is a lot of fun. If you want to jazz up, if you want to play a pinball machine with a jazzed up display, you can get things like this on visual pinball. That's one of the advantages of having a digital Backglass like these is the fact that somebody can actually program it, make it do different things, and it adds a little bit of excitement to the Backglass. So now you know the difference between an animated Backglass, between a fantasy Backglass, which is what we have here, and the actual Backglass, which I showed you before. Okay? Just remember, the actual authentic Backglass, if it's authentic, and the original Backglass will be like you find if you're playing in an arcade. If you have a fantasy Backglass, it's going to be one like you have here that has a bunch of little things added to it to add some excitement to the thing when you're playing. And as you're going to see, these light up back and forth here, and then this also lights up as well, and it really jazzes it up. Now, let me show you one of my favorite fantasy Backglasses that I have right now, and I think you're going to really get an idea how cool this actually looks. Okay, we're going to go ahead now. We're going to load up Funhouse now. On my visual pinball cabinet, I don't have an authentic Backglass version of Funhouse. I only use the fantasy Backglass because I find it absolutely awesome and I really enjoy it. Okay, so here's the Funhouse. Here's the fantasy version of Funhouse with the fantasy Backglass. Now you're going to notice, instead of having standard lighting, it does have standard lighting, but then you're going to see something really cool happen up here with the letters on here, up here where the Funhouse is. Now watch and you'll get a chance to see it. Now what it's going to do is, as it cycles through, you're going to see that this is actually going to change up here on top. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit the start button. Now, notice the letters and things on top, and watch how they change when I start a game, and you'll see the difference. This basically is what it would look like more or less if you were playing it. Now watch what happens when I start a game, and watch the letters on top. See how they have little lights and things in there? That's a fantasy mode. Somebody actually programmed all those little things to look like these little LEDs in there. It just adds a lot of excitement. So now you get an idea what an animated fantasy Backglass is and what an authentic Backglass is. And I hope this video has been very helpful to you as far as helping you set up your visual pinball. Now the thing to keep in mind, the thing to keep in mind when you're doing pinball machines like this, whether or not you want to have a fantasy Backglass or if you have an authentic Backglass, really just comes down to personal preference. I myself prefer to use fantasy Backglasses if I can get them because I find they add a lot of excitement to the games. And it's kind of nice to be able to play and have a few extra things added that you might not find in a normal pinball version. Now, the thing to keep in mind is, I've noticed since I've been checking out some of the pinball shows and things online now, that they are starting to add more animated Backglasses and things like that as well. You know, you can get mods and things for your home pinball machine as well that are pretty cool. They're starting to do as well. If you have a real pinball machine, you want to get some animations and things. They are starting to add more things. I saw an Attack from Mars that had a pretty awesome Backglass where it actually changed. The images actually changed and stuff. And I also saw one for Big Bang Bar as well that was pretty cool. Okay, so I hope that this was helpful in being able to help you choose what type of Backglass you want to run when you're using your visual pinball. Okay, thank you again for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye now.